Welcome back. This is video number 2 for chapter 8 on social stratification. So we already talked about what social stratification is and how that plays into social class and how that's part of it. We also talked about the 3 dimensions and the dimensions are the things that create the stratification or create the layers in society. And that's based upon your access to things like power, wealth, prestige. But now let's look into what do sociological theory say about why this stratification happens or why people get put into these layers. So the 3 sociological perspectives, remember, functionalism, symbolic interactionism, and conflict theory. So first we're going to look at functionalism. So remember, functionalism is all about society being a system of interrelated parts. And if one part of society is affected, it will cause like a domino effect and affect the other parts. Remember, society is like a human body and all of the organs that have to work together. So functionalism looks at it and says that the reason why these layers are created in society and that some people have more than others is just because people are rewarded for their hard work. If you work really hard and you have lots of skills, or you go to school for a very long time, you're going to get more pay and you're going to be rewarded for that hard work. Well, that's one fallacy to the functionalism theory, is that, the work harder, the more money you get. Think about the number of people that went to school 4 years and wasn't able to find a job. Think about very smart people that that have a lot of skills, that have a lot of abilities, but they don't have a high wage. I know my dad came from a farming family of 8, and only 1 boy and 1 girl was sent to college. But my dad is one of the smartest people that I know that is very highly skilled, and he was a farmer and then was a carpenter. But for most of my childhood, we practically lived in poverty. So, this theory doesn't always hold up. If you look on I think it's very fascinating, on page 211 in your book, there's this yellow box that has different occupations and their prestige level, like how highly regarded or respectable the positions are. The most highly regarded, surgeon and lawyer. Again, those are very highly regarded positions. People have to go to school for a long time, and people make a lot of money in those positions. But then next is college professor. Well, I want you to know that when we're talking about at the university level, those instructors have PhDs. And if you look at what their salary is compared to a doctor or a lawyer, sometimes, especially lawyers, college university professors have way more schooling than them, but the pay doesn't equal. Some other things that are highly regarded, things that you would expect, things like a pharmacist or an accountant. How about this? A professional athlete, again, very high wage occupations, but things such as a public grade school teacher or a veterinarian. Now that's an interesting one. Most veterinarians, they're doctors. Well, of course they're doctors, but they actually don't make a whole lot of money. Most people, when you go to the vet's office, yes, it's very expensive. I know, I have a big dog myself, but just think of all the things that they have to pay for. And they're not able usually to bill insurance companies for expensive procedures. They have to rely that people are able to pay for those out of pocket. And you can go out and do a little research on your own if you like, but there are lots of veterinarians that are struggling just to meet the bills day to day because they still had to have a high level of education, but they're not able to recruit a big income from that. So moving along, let's look at symbolic interactionism. Remember, that is the theory looking at that we transmit our culture through interactions between people. It's based upon shared symbols, shared meanings behind behaviors and those symbols, and how it's something, that socialization process that's happening, it continues throughout our whole life. So symbolic interactionism looks at it and says that the reason why this stratification exists and it continues to exist is because we accept it as that's just how life is, and we socialize it into future generations. It becomes in our self-concept, and remember, self-concept is that belief system or the way you picture yourself based upon your own internal values. And it's the way that we come up with these explanations for the reasons why people are rich, the reasons why people are poor. And what it leads to is self-blame, because we look at the people who are rich that, oh, they worked hard to get there, or, they really earned that. They're there because that's the way they're supposed to be. Well, then on the flip side, we look people who don't have a lot of money, and it leads to self-blame because then we look at them and say, well, why didn't you work hard enough? That idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. I mean, we're really feeling that right now as a response to, right now we're going through the COVID-19 epidemic. That's why we're all doing these videos online and students are watching from their homes. But think about the number of people who are impacted right now by loss of work, not having the ability to pay for the basic needs that families have. It's a time that we really struggle. So symbolic interactionism, again, looks at that we have established this stratification and it keeps replicating itself because we keep teaching it to our future generations and teaching our children these ideas about why people are where they are in society. So finally, we're going to look at conflict theory. And conflict theory states that inequality exists because people are willing to exploit others for personal gain. So remember when we talked in the very first video and we looked at that triangle of the social stratification, and it symbolized that there's not too many people at the top, but there's a whole lot of people at the very bottom because, more people are at the bottom of that triangle, meaning that there are a lot of people who are determined as working poor or working class or underclass, whatever you want to call it. Conflict theory really pulls back the curtains and is trying to see, how does this happen? How do we end up with so few people at the top and a lot of people at the bottom? Well, they're looking at it as the elite and the wealthy has so much power that they are able to exploit workers for their work. Let's take, for example, grocery stores now. They are doing fantastic. The likes of Walmart, Aldi's, you name it, these stores are making lots of money. Have you been in Walmart or in Aldi's lately? The shelves for milk and bread and staples and toilet paper, they are empty, and those staff are working round the clock to fill the shelves. Well, these companies are making bank over this crisis. Sorry, that's my dog, Molly. She may come down here, maybe not. But anyway, think about the people who are making money at this time. Yes, there are corporations that are suffering, but there are some that are making lots of money out of this. So what happens, so the question I ask is, so Walmart's doing really well. Their CEOs and the people that are investing in Walmart are making lots of money. Think about the company that makes Zoom. That's what we're going to be using today in our class to meet one-on-one. Their stock is going up. People are investing. It's a popular product. But are those companies sharing those profits, sharing the success that they're having with the people down below? So I can give you an example like Aldi's. I don't know, I'm a big Aldi's fan. What they're doing for their staff that are working in the stores is they each got a $2 an hour raise. Aldi's is paying for them to have lunch catered in every day. I've heard that some Aldi's stores are sending their staff home with care packages. They're doing what they can to take care of their people. But what usually happens is that in these big corporations where you have these elite and very wealthy owners at the top, they are usually making extreme profits at the expense of their low-wage workers, their entry-level workers who are making just minimum wage. And that's where this stratification is created. And what those people at the top, what they want to do is they want to maintain their elite status. They want to maintain their profits and they want to get even more wealthy. And they have access to certain resources like different friends and networks that they're in that they can get in on special deals. I don't know if you heard, but there are some legislators that are really in big trouble right now because days before things really started getting chaotic with the stock market, there was a bunch of legislators that sold off a bunch of their stock before their stock went down in the tank, and they're looking like they're going to be in trouble for that. Well, how did they know? Because they had insider information. And the only reason they had that inside information is because they are so well connected in their communities with other very wealthy, powerful people that know when things are going to happen and know when, for the lack of better terms, the you know what hits the fan. So that leads, and all of this creation of this stratification leads to something called the false consciousness. This is where working class people accept the dominant ideology, even though it works against their own best interests. So we have this ideology here in the United States that the way that we are set up under capitalism, where people, very wealthy people, a lot of them at the top, and then the situation with the middle class and the people at the bottom, and this understanding that the people at the bottom are there because of bad choices that they've made, and this socialization that happens to ingrain these ideas in our social structure has set us up to believing that I am where I am because of the decisions that I've made. When in reality, we again need to pull those curtains back and see what's really happening underneath and recognize that those at the top are actually making more money. They're making profits off of the work that the service-oriented, that entry-level people at the bottom are doing. So that's those three sociological perspectives. We're going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about stratification here in America, what that means, and we're going to look at poverty and what that looks like here in the U.S.